I'm Lindsay Maycock, to introduce myself. I'm based in Glasgow, and I myself was once a student journalist. I went to Edinburgh Napier University, and I had an interest in environmental journalism. I made content about environmental issues, and I went on to do Extinction Rebellion's Rebel Radio, which was my introduction to activism. And I simply would not be where I am today had it not been for my early experiences of interviewing some very, very inspirational activists. So I hope today to perhaps pass some of that on to some of you as well. We're going to start with an introduction of our panelists today. So we have a wide variety. I would like to apologise, sadly, Emma Brown could not make it today, but on to the panel. So our first section, if you like, is the story so far. What are our demands and the actions, and what have we achieved? And for that, I'm going to be passing on to Louise.
Thank you, Lindsay. So, hi everyone, my name's Louise Harris. I'm 24 years old, and you might recognise me from the viral video that was just shown where I'm crying on top of an M25 gantry for non-violently fighting for my life. I've been arrested 5 times with Just Stop Oil. I've spent 8 days in Bronzefield prison, and I was subject to a GPS ankle tag binding me to my hometown for over a month. Just Stop Oil is a coalition of ordinary people demanding that the UK government immediately halt all future licensing and consents for the exploration, development and production of fossil fuels in the UK. Our government are pushing through over 100 new oil and gas licenses, and now even want to open a new coal mine, the first in 30 years. Our demand is a simple no-brainer. We are simply reiterating what the United Nations, the International Energy Agency, and the IPCC are all saying. In the words of Antonio Guterres, we are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator. Our campaign of civil resistance started back in March 2022, when we disrupted cultural events such as the BAFTAs and some high-profile Premier League football matches. In April, we took our disruption directly to the fossil fuel industry. Just Stop Oil, just stopped oil. For weeks, we blocked oil terminals, which led to as many as 1 in 3 petrol stations in the south of England being closed. We also disabled petrol pumps at services on the M25, which was replicated again later in August, when we once again blocked oil terminals. Throughout the summer, we hit headlines with our disruption at the Formula 1 racetrack and by gluing to famous paintings in art galleries. October was then the peak of our campaign. Every single day, we blocked roads in and around Westminster, taking our disruption right to the heart of power. And we spray painted numerous buildings, including 55 Tufton Street, Scotland Yard, and News Corp HQ. We threw cake at King Charles's wax figure, and of course, we threw soup at Van Gogh, making us a major global headline for the first time. In October alone, we had over 30 million views on our videos, and our social media followers doubled. In November, we shut down the M25 motorway for 4 consecutive days. 24 supporters were remanded straight to prison, with many later subject to ankle tags, and with several still in prison right now. So we've been busy. Our talks have reached over 8,000 people, and over 800 people have risked arrest for their actions so far. We have not only created a media storm, from making TV headlines every day to endless radio interviews to being discussed on BBC Question Time, but a political storm too. From MPs calling for us to be a proscribed organisation, to the police saying we can't arrest our way out of environmental protests, to Suella Braverman calling us tofu-eating wokerati, to the Prime Minister now pushing through a new anti-protest, anti-democracy public order bill. Meanwhile, the Scottish government and all major political parties other than the Tories have adopted our demand. Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, SNP all support our demand. The Governmental Environmental Audit Community Report is also now calling for an end date to new fossil fuel licensing to be set. And HSBC and Lloyds Bank have publicly announced they will stop financing new oil and gas fields. In the space of not even a year, we have had a huge impact, which will only continue.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Louise. And on to our second statement. So we often get asked, why does civil disobedience work? And for that, I'm going to be handing over to Phoebe.
Hi, thank you, Lindsay. I'm Phoebe, I'm 21 and I'm a social anthropology student from London, although I'm probably more well known as one of the soup throwers. And I've taken action with Just Stop Oil 7 other times, including roadblocks, targeting petrol stations and the M25 actions, following which I spent 28 days on remand at H&P Bronzefield and I'm now on a curfew tag. I'm going to talk to you about why we use civil disobedience and why disruption is necessary to get the radical change we need in the timescale we have left to avert complete climate catastrophe. I sit here as living proof that civil resistance works. I'm queer, non-binary and born female. So this means the only reason I'm able to vote, able to go to university, hopefully someday I'll marry the woman I love, is because of those who have taken part in civil resistance before me. History has shown us time and time again that successful movements of social change must cause disruption. For 50 years, climate scientists and activists have been trying to get their voices heard. All of us on this panel have tried non-disruptive forms of activism. I've signed more petitions than I have bones in my body and written more letters to MPs than I can count. And I've seen that placards and petitions are too easily ignored. Shutting down motorways can't be. Throwing soup on a painting can't be. Directly stopping the flow of oil can't be. And I'm fed up of being ignored when it's my future that's at stake. So we can no longer carry on with business as usual. We're staring right at the greatest crisis humanity has ever faced. We have to force the climate crisis to the forefront of public consciousness, and our tactics have proved themselves successful. We now have 92% name recognition, which is even higher than Greenpeace, and received over 46,000 mentions in the UK and US press in 2022. And every mention of Just Stop Oil is a mention of the climate crisis and the catastrophic consequences of continuing to drill for new oil and gas. The media report on us because we disrupt. I didn't get to talk to you today because I attended a march. If the media reported on the climate crisis as the crisis it truly is, we wouldn't have to do this. Why, when Anna and I threw soup on a painting, did more people talk about the climate crisis when only weeks before 33 million people were displaced by the floods in Pakistan? Why has it been left to us to make the biggest threat to human life newsworthy? We disrupt because otherwise the media would not even discuss the climate crisis. Disruption is a proportionate response to the future we're facing. And the government can end our disruption any day they choose when they make a meaningful statement to halt all new oil and gas licenses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phoebe. And on to our final introductory statement. We are going to lay out what do we expect of the media. So as Phoebe has just explained, it's very difficult to appear in the news. So we have demands and expectations of the media. So in a way, what we expect of our audience. So for that, I'm going to pass over to Rachel.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Bostler. I'm a 27-year-old assistant lecturer living in Essex, and I am absolutely furious about the British government continuing its imperial legacy by continuing to pass climate policy that condemns those in poorer and island nations to death. So this has led me to take action with Just Stop Oil 5 times. Blocking the flow of fossil capital from oil terminals and disrupting business as usual in the seat of power with roadblocks and slow marches. But I'm here today to talk about the media. The mainstream media have failed every single one of us by declining to educate and inform the public about the severity of the climate crisis and what has caused it. In keeping us distracted with petty puff pieces instead, they have blood on their hands. So, in addition to our demands that the British government stop all new fossil fuel licensing, we also have some demands from the media to help us achieve this goal. 1, cover the climate crisis like COVID, giving it the priority it deserves. I'm sick of having to scroll past articles about what Kim Kardashian wore to the Met Gala to find credible information about the biggest existential threat to humanity. 2, explain what scientific, technical things like tipping points or 1.5 versus 2 degrees of warming really means. It means droughts, mudslides, fires, crop failures, food shortages, refugees, civil unrest, and wars over scarce resources. 3, when these calamities occur, you can't report on them without mentioning that they're caused by the burning of fossil fuels. Last week, in my home state of California, over 20 people died due to extreme storms in the middle of a drought. This was not a natural disaster, as was reported in much of the media. You know more than anyone, as journalists, that language is important. 4, stop platforming fringe extremists to try and show both sides when there is expert consensus on the side that burning fossil fuels has no role in our future. Those who refuse to acknowledge the reality of the crisis, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and anyone who thinks that you can grow concrete, also have no business spouting their nonsense on primetime slots. 5, scientists who have been paid by the fossil industry to spread lies should be treated like the pariahs that they are. 6, stop falling for greenwashing bullshit. Don't report that fossil fuel companies are decarbonizing when all they're doing are silly accounting tricks. 7, you have a responsibility to report accurately rather than trying to sensationalize. In October, a 19-year-old passing by who was terrified about her future sat down and blocked a road with Just Stop Oil supporters, including me. Yet the media only covers it when someone attacks us, failing to reflect what it's really like on the ground and what people are really thinking. 8, do actual investigative journalism. This doesn't mean stalking and harassing ordinary people and their families, but targeting those with the real power in our society. 9, follow the money. Find empirical evidence about why our governments aren't protecting us and be fearless in letting the world know. Investigate and call out businesses and politicians excusing mass death just to add some zeros to their bank accounts. 10, and most importantly, the media have been trying to divide us, with those who have taken action against the climate crisis pitted against those who have not yet or are unable to. Coverage of Just Stop Oil as dangerous outsiders rather than terrified teachers, nurses, retail assistants, mothers, fathers, and grandparents fighting for simple, no-brainer policy supported by the world's top scientists has led to brutal assaults on Just Stop Oil supporters. Just recently, a 60-year-old grandmother was sent to the hospital with stitches after being attacked by someone who quoted lines straight from the mouth of our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Dividing us also enacts symbolic violence and failing to account for the reality that all of us just want a future where we can be safe and happy, not only with our basic needs met, but able to spend time doing what we love with those we care about. With our shit show of a government, in order for this future to be a reality, journalists like you are our only hope.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And now I'm going to pass to the rest of the panel to do a short introduction. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves, as well as why they chose to get involved in Just Stop Oil and do the actions that they've done. So with that, I'm going to pass to Anna.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Anna Holland. I'm a 21 English Lit student, and you probably again know me best for throwing the tomato soup at Van Gogh sunflowers. That was definitely the biggest action I've taken with Just Stop Oil. But before that, I was arrested 3 times for blocking roads around London in the month of the civil disobedience against our government.
Thanks, Anna. I'll pass to Laura.
Hello, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm Laura. I'm a 38-year-old single mom from Essex, and my arrest video went viral where I said I'm doing this for my son, and the climate crisis, the government inaction on climate crisis is a death sentence to us all, and they're very true statements. I've got an amazing 7-year-old son, and he's very creative. At the moment, he's obsessed with Sierra Leone, so he's drawing maps to get to Sierra Leone and telling me he wants to be in the jungle for 2 years there when he's older. And how can I tuck him in bed at night and look him in the eyes, knowing that his future is so perilous? And as a mother, the only thing I can do is join civil resistance. And we all need to do our bit, because there is no future for any of us unless we stop this corrupt government. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I'll pass to Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a 24-year-old PhD student studying green hydrogen production. I had never been to a protest before Just Stop Oil, but after my first talk in March, I knew it was my moral responsibility to just step up. So 2 weeks later, I ran in front of a moving oil tanker and sat down on the road for 14 hours waiting to get arrested. Since then, I've been on many actions and supporting and participating, including blocking oil pipelines for 40 hours.
Thanks, Alex. I'll pass to Chloe.
Hi, everybody. So yes, I'm Chloe. I'm a 43-year-old middle-class mum living in Bristol. I've got 2 boys. Laurie is 13 and Gil is 10, and they're brilliant. And as Laura said, as a parent, you want to be able to look your child in the eye and promise that you will keep them safe. And I can't do that with my children. So I got involved with Extinction Rebellion about 3 years ago, assuming that I would do community projects and work with families, and I did all of that stuff. And then I realised that the most impactful thing I could do was put my body on the line. And I was arrested 4 times with various actions with Extinction Rebellion, and then recognised that the most impactful thing I could then do was to join with Just Stop Oil and the extremely targeted actions that they were taking against fossil fuel infrastructure. And in September this year, I joined 50 other people at the Kingsbury Oil Depot. We broke an injunction, and I spent a week on remand in Foston Hall. I never ever thought I would go to prison. I never thought I would break the law. I've been a very, very well-behaved person up till this point in my life. It's quite shocking to find myself in this position. But I'm doing it for my children. I'm doing it so that they can grow up strong and healthy and happy, and not spend their lives watching everything collapse around them, which is what I fear most. So that's why I'm here, is why I've been involved.
Thanks, Chloe. I'll pass to Oliver.
Yeah, good afternoon. So yeah, I'm 19 years old. I'm a student at the University of Manchester studying plant science, and I've been taking action with Just Stop Oil. So I've been arrested 6 times and convicted twice, including being banned from the football. Yeah, and so I've blocked oil infrastructure, blocked roads, including Lady Gaga's car at the BAFTAs, gone onto football pitches, yeah, and I'm going to continue until the government makes a statement that it will not license any new fossil fuel projects.
Thank you, Oliver. And I'll pass to James.
Hi, yeah, it's really good to see so many people here. I'm James. I'm going to take the average age of our spokes team up a little bit. I'm 47. I live in Norfolk. My niece and nephew live just down the road from me, and I'm not worried I'm very worried that they're going to not reach my age at the rate that we're going on with this criminal government. So I've been taking action with Extinction Rebellion and more recently Just Stop Oil to try and bring about the change we need. And I'm going to keep having to do that until we get that change and we have no new oil and gas. Thanks very much.
Thanks, James. And last but certainly not least, I'll pass to Graham.
Hi, everyone. My name's Graham Buss. I used to work for Shell, actually. I was a principal scientist. I'm the oldest one here, probably. I'm 67. When I left Shell, one of the first things I did was to join Extinction Rebellion. I was arrested there once. And now I'm very proud to say that I'm part of Just Stop Oil. Oil and gas has no part in our future. That's absolutely clear. No new oil and gas is an essential requirement of a safe future. That's why I'm here today.
Thanks, Graham. And that is all of our panelists. So we're going to start with our Q&A session section of today's session. So once again, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat, or if you would like to ask your question aloud, feel free to put your hand up. Just another little housekeeping rule: if you're not speaking, if you could keep yourself on mute, that would help us out a lot. So we've had some questions sent into us. We have a question here for Phoebe. What did you feel just before the paint action? Were you prepared for the outrage?
Right before the action, I was a ball of nerves. It's not every day that you wake up and think, I'm gonna throw soup in the National Gallery today. It was a very strange experience coming out of custody about 30 hours later and seeing what a media storm we'd created. I remember my friend told me that we had 50 million views on Twitter, and I thought he was lying to me. He must have been joking. It was overwhelming, the media storm. But as I said in my speech, the media storm is necessary, and it's not a media storm about me or throwing soup. It's a media storm about Just Stop Oil and the realities of the climate crisis and our clear, no-brainer demand to end new oil and gas.
Thanks, Phoebe. We have another question that's been sent in here. Why is Just Stop Oil always so negative? Haven't you got any positive messaging? Would Chloe like to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Well, I mean, the most important thing we've got to do is stop doing something. But alongside that message, we also have to start other things. So the message Just Stop Oil comes alongside switching towards renewable energy sources. It comes alongside insulating our homes. The very best energy is the energy that we don't have to use. So insulating our homes and businesses so that we don't leak unnecessary energy is absolutely crucial. And we have to switch positively towards public transport. I think those three things are, rather than a don't do this, they are a do this. But the most important part of that message is the one that we need people to hear, which is that the oil is the problem. And I think once you start to engage with what we're saying and the sort of the broader message of the social transition that we need, it starts to become really positive, because the world that we're living in at the moment isn't serving anybody. We've got people who are in their homes having to choose between heating and eating. We know that we've got astonishing rates of poverty which are climbing in this country at the moment. So many of the things that we need to do for the climate will also impact on the living standards of people in this country. And we're also facing a mental health crisis in this country, which comes from the sort of omni-crisis, which is being thrown at us from all directions. If we start to fix some of that stuff, and if we start to engage more deeply in community and in working together, we will be happier. So I think there's such an awful lot that is really positive in what we're saying, but absolutely at the front and centre of the message is we have to stop oil.
Thank you. I'm wondering if perhaps Graham, as someone who's worked in energy and very closely with that, has anything to add to that question?
I'll just give a short, I'll make a short statement about this. All the solutions we need are already here. You as the media need to tell people what they are. They're all available. We know what they are. You need to talk about it. Stop talking about it as something hard. It's not. Of course, vested interests don't want us to do it. And that's probably why mostly we don't hear about it. But the solutions are all there already. Okay.
Absolutely. And Alex is also coming from a scientific background. Anything to add, Alex?
Yes, basically just saying that a lot of our message does seem alarmist, and that's because it is alarming, the future that we're facing. While we have all these amazing solutions, while we still have new oil, everything else is just mopping up with the tap open. Right now, renewable energies are currently 9 times cheaper, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be switching to that. Although our primary message is no new oil, all of our secondary demands, such as subsidized public transport, insulate homes, all relate to the solutions of how we can do that and how we can actually help with the cost of living crisis too.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We have a question here that is specifically for Louise, although I'm sure it does apply to many of the panel members here. A lot of young people think are perhaps worried that their future is going to be affected by the actions that they've done. So do you worry about your criminal record? So that one was for Louise.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's a good question. Obviously, having a criminal record is not what I kind of desired out of life. But the way I see it is, you know, the scientists are predicting we're going to go over 2 degrees of global heating in the next 10 to 30 years. Even the United Nations are predicting by 2030, over half of the African continent will be displaced due to water scarcity. So that's a global crisis. That's 7 years away. That's global food shortages, water shortages. That's war and conflict, which happens, you know, whenever there's displacement and migration and conflict over scarce resources. So the world which I face, you know, my main concern is, am I going to find enough food? Am I going to find enough water? What's going to happen around me? You know, are children going to be laughing in the playgrounds, making daisy chains, or are they going to be cowering under their desks, you know, hiding from war? So, you know, and also, like, I am a singer-songwriter. That's always been my dream. But what music industry is there going to be, you know, in the next 10 to 30 years when that is all happening? I'm much more worried about survival, just that basic thing which we all have a right to. We have a right to life. The government is taking that right away. So, you know, a criminal record is the least of my worries, and I know that I'm not a criminal. I'm doing all I can to stop the real criminals in power.
Absolutely. Thank you, Louise. So there's sort of another part of this question that I perhaps missed out a bit here, that a lot of people think that young people like yourself, and I'm sure many people in JSO are being used by JSO. So just quickly, what do you have to say to that?
I do not feel used. No one's being used in Just Stop Oil. We are being told the truth, which journalists and presenters are failing to do, our world leaders are failing to do. Fossil fuel companies are actively telling lies. For the past 50 years, we've seen through the BBC's documentary Big Oil versus the World, these massive energy companies have deliberately had PR campaigns to sow seeds of climate denial, doubt about the science, uncertainty. You know, Just Stop Oil, the people in Just Stop Oil, we are trying to tell the truth to everybody. And once you understand the truth about your life is in danger, literally it's life or death, it's a black or white situation, you have a choice. You either do something about it, you step into civil resistance, you call out the fucking bullshit, or you go around and you know, hoping for the best and hoping these world leaders do something, which they're clearly not doing. So, you know, no one's being used. We're all being used by the government and by these corporations. But Just Stop Oil is ordinary people understanding the truth, facing it head on, even though it's extremely difficult, and putting our lives on the line to try and save what actually matters, and that is life itself.
Thank you. So we have another question sent into us here, perhaps quite an important question that has become rather the elephant in the room in a lot of these activist spaces. So how do you feel about XR's announcement that they aren't going to do things that will get them arrested as a main tactic anymore? Do you think they could be right? So I know you, James, have been very into XR as well as JSO. So would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting change of tactics from Extinction Rebellion, and a good one, you know, because it does open up the arena to far more people be able to perhaps join in with protest against the climate crisis that we're facing. So on the 21st of April, they've said 100,000 people come down to London outside Parliament and say, look, stop government. We need to change the way we're living. We need to stop new oil and gas. We need to deal with these extreme weather events, floods, drought, famine, harvest failures. So they've said they're going to temporarily pause civil disruption. Public disruption. They're going to see how that works out, and it may be that in the future they go back to similar tactics that we're using. I think the answer is we need all these tactics. We need all these people. We need public disruption from Just Stop Oil and similar movements, and we need, if you like, a more moderate flank that's open to more people that can join in with protest on the pavement. And where's your excuse if you're concerned about the climate crisis? XR are giving you a platform now. Extinction Rebellion giving you a platform to get out on the pavements and let your voice be heard. And this is really important. Let your voice be heard before the government shuts that down with things like the Public Order Bill, because you've got these extreme rules going through the House of Lords at the moment. They're just going to shut down freedom of speech and turn us into an even more authoritarian state. So yeah, it's a change of tactics. It might be temporary. Let's see how it works out. But it does open the door, hopefully, to lots more people getting out on the streets, which is what we need. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. I believe we have a hand up. Am I right in saying Claire has a hand up?
Hi, yes. Thanks everyone for everything that's been said so far. My question is kind of related to the one which James just answered, but so yeah, XR have said they're going to do this, temporary pivot away from disrupting the public, focusing on those in power and sites of power. So I guess I just wanted to ask, what do you think the value is of disrupting the public over, exclusively focusing on sites of power? Like obviously, I know JSO has done a lot in terms of, in terms of doing that, in terms of disrupting oil terminals and so on. But yeah, what is the specific value of disrupting the public?
Absolutely. Shall I pass that one to Laura? Would you like to answer this one?
Hello. Yeah. I might be making it a bit too simple here, but I take it it's just simply it's a numbers game. We don't have that many to cause. Sorry, this is terrible answer. I wish I didn't put my hand up. Just Stop Oil are there to raise the alarm, basically. We're there to make sure the public are aware how serious it is. But when you have hundreds of thousands of people, that gives the media attention anyway. So Extinction Rebellion can go on the 21st of April, and if there's 100,000 of them, they don't need to block any roads to get loads of attention. The more people that join faster in these movements, the less disruption we need. And we wouldn't actually need to block any roads if we had 100,000 people marching with Just Stop Oil.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I believe Tanya has a hand up.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about your future plans for this year. In one of the interviews, I think it was Alex, he promised to escalate the protest this year. And I would like to ask you what will be the differences between the protests we have already seen and the future ones.
Thank you. Alex, would you like to take that one?
Yes, sure. So as we've said many times, we will stop the disruption and we'll get off the streets immediately if there's an end to new oil and gas, if the government make that meaningful statement. But sadly, if they don't, then yes, unfortunately, we do have to escalate things because the situation is only going to get worse every single year. And we're facing more and more of these climate tipping points and more worse natural disasters. As the situation gets worse, what is a proportional response to the situation is also going to increase. It's unfortunately as simple as that. We need to do whatever we can. Not violently, of course.
Thank you, Alex. We have a question here from Steve. Are you seeing more people joining you either as activists or followers? Do you have specific plans to build such a following? And also put a little message here saying thanks and hats off to you all. Thank you very much, Steve, for that question. Rachel, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. I'm not sure I would use the word follower, but Just Stop Oil is substantially larger than perhaps we tend to look in the press. So we understand that not everyone is able to be arrested and do these more disruptive actions. So we have a very large group of supporters who help us with other things, such as doing mobilization, such as doing tech on Zooms, like we have our team today. People who are doing media sometimes are not able to be arrested. So we already do have a very large group of, we'd call them supporters, perhaps, instead of followers. And it does continue to grow. So just as people will be joining Extinction Rebellion, we also are seeing an increase in our supporters, and we are increasing all the time. So it's been really positive response we've gotten from the public.
Thank you very much. We had a question in a couple minutes ago via the chat, which is a really good question, actually. How do you sort of recruit activists, and how do you decide who is going to do what action? Do you train activists, and do you prepare them for the consequences that they may face after their action? And that one is from Caroline. Now, I know based on my own experience that Anna is brilliant in support roles as much as they are out doing actions themselves. So Anna, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, of course. I, alongside taking action, I work in sort of like the mobilization and the support side of Just Stop Oil. And honestly, my favorite thing about Just Stop Oil is how much support is given to every single person who takes action. So no one goes into an action with Just Stop Oil unless they are completely trained in how to remain non-violent and focused and calm throughout the action. No one goes into an action without a full understanding of both the legal and social consequences of that action that they will take. And that is all thanks to an entire team of people dedicated to training all of us in non-violent direct action using similar methods that were used by freedom riders and the civil rights movement of the 60s. We have solicitors who will work with us, who will support us through court and through the judiciary system. We have people who will wait outside of police stations around the clock when we've been arrested, so that anytime someone comes out of the police cell, there are people there waiting for them to make sure that we know that we are supported and cared for. People wait with teas, coffees, food, hugs. Truly, the support that is given to everyone taking action is one of the most important foundations of the community of civil resistance that we've been able to build in Just Stop Oil.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Anna. Now, we have a question from a Year 10 student and a young reporter at the East Bergerholt High School in Suffolk. I understand your cause and as a young person appreciate it and see the importance, but I know not how everyone or every family can afford electric cars, solar paneling, and what your advice is to families and young people who want to do something but feel they can't, especially with the current financial crisis. Shall I pass this one to Rachel, perhaps? Would you like to answer this one?
I think this would go well to someone with a science background, as they've mentioned some technology. So perhaps Alex or Graham?
Alex, would you like to answer that one?
Sure, I can do so briefly, but I see Louise is also wanting to answer this, so I'll pass it on in a second. First of all, thank you very much for the question and for coming. We in Just Stop Oil, we're called Just Stop Oil, first of all, not Just Start Electric Cars. There is unfortunately, sorry, let me start over. Just Stop Oil is all about systemic change, so what the government can do as opposed to what we as individuals can do. We're trying to make them help us with the cost of living crisis, because you're right, not everybody can afford electric cars and solar panels, but they have insane amounts of money which they are not using in the correct place. So that's why our focus is on them. But I'm going to pass to somebody who will answer this question better, such as Graham or Louise.
Graham, go ahead. Would you like to answer this one?
Well, again, I'll try and keep it short. Thanks for the question. It's very important, I think. One of the things to recognise is that one of the reasons why you have to stop new oil and gas is that the oil and gas industry slows down the transition. There's a huge amount of capital in the world available to invest in other technologies. But if you still have oil and gas industries, that stops some of that investment taking place. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing is I want to support what Alex says. This is what the changes that need to be made need to come from government, because they need to incentivize the sorts of changes we need to see. And a lot of this isn't to do with there are personal changes you have to make. There are personal changes that need to be made, but fundamentally, it's about what governments do. Governments can invest in insulating people's homes. Governments can invest in public transport. Governments can make many of the changes we need to see. They can invest in renewable technologies. It isn't just about electric cars, and it isn't just about personal choices, although I do urge you to think about what personal changes you could make to your life. I've made changes. I'm not demanding them of you, but I've made changes to my life. I've decided I'm not going to fly. I've decided I'm not going to eat meat. And if you listen to what other commentators say on this topic, those are probably the two biggest changes you can make in your life if you want to make a personal change. But fundamentally, our demands are to government.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So we have a question here sent in to us. Much of the media response is centered around the art protests and the question of why we target artworks as direct attention to the cause. What is the link between the artworks you're targeting and your cause? Is there such a connection, or is this lack of such deliberate? So Phoebe, would you like to answer this one?
As I said in my introduction, we are disrupting cultural events to get media attention because the media is not reporting on the climate crisis as they should be. And one of the main comments I had following the Van Gogh action was, what do you think this helps? Why haven't you directly disrupted the fossil fuel industry? We did, all through April, all through August. And the fact that you had to ask that question is why we also disrupt cultural events. I think one of the reasons it got such a media storm was when people saw us throw soup on a painting, they saw something beautiful and precious and they thought it was being damaged or destroyed. But I'd ask you where that emotional response is when we're set to lose our real sunflowers, when we're losing our real crops, 1/3 of our wheat crops and half of our potato crops this year. You should be feeling shock and horror and outrage at the loss of those things, not even a painting being damaged. A bit of glass had soup thrown on it and it was wiped off with kitchen roll whilst me and Anna were still glued to the wall.
Thank you. We have another really important question here from Becky. How do we ensure a just transition for those workers and communities reliant on the industries created by fossil fuels when we're transitioning to the much needed renewables? Graham, would you like to answer that question?
The transition out of oil and gas isn't about losing jobs, it's about making new jobs. All the people who are currently in those industries, there are more jobs than we can probably find people for required in that transition. It's not about losing our quality of our life. It's about changing the quality of our life. And at the moment, the oil and gas industry is going to destroy our futures. So the best thing we can do now is to stop oil and gas and transition the people in those industries out of those industries and into new jobs. Otherwise, we're just waiting to fall off the edge of a cliff, and it'll all happen so quickly. It'll be very disruptive, like it was for the miners under Thatcher, which was a long time ago, I suspect, for many of the people on this call. You have to manage the change. If you want to make an equitable transition, you have to manage it. And at the moment, that's not what we're seeing from our government.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So we have another really good question here. Are you overwhelmed by all these environmental problems and the rather grim predictions that have been set out and imagining about the future? So this question, needless to say, I'm sure is particularly relevant to young people. So Oliver, would you like to answer that question?
No, we are all overwhelmed by like the state of the climate, but I think the important thing is that's what leads us into action, and it's what leads us into that empowerment. So when you know that your world is being trashed, that your future is being destroyed by those in power and you are powerless to do anything about it, that feels terrible, that feels awful, and I imagine that's what a lot of you are feeling. But when you step up and you know that you're doing what is within your power, you know that you're resisting that government, that you're not kind of sitting down and taking it, that you're actually stepping up and saying, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm not going to be part of this distraction. That is what is so empowering and actually helps us to get through the kind of despair.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So I believe Tanya has their hand up again.
Yes, I have one more question. I think this is for those who took part in the protest in the galleries. So can you describe briefly how do you decide the object, the painting of the protest? So your goal, for example, like with the Van Gogh masterpiece. So the process, how do you decide who will be so-called the victim, I would say?
Absolutely, thank you very much. So we've already heard from Phoebe on the subject of painting. So how about Anna, would you like to answer this one?
Absolutely, thank you for that question. And there were a number of reasons that went into the choice of the Van Gogh painting for our action. And I don't know if I'd call Van Gogh a victim of our action, maybe a target. So initially we chose Van Gogh's Sunflowers because it is such a famous painting. It's so notorious. Everyone knows it. Everyone has a special connection to it. So Phoebe and I knew that when people believed that something that beautiful and that powerful was in quote unquote danger, even though it was protected, it would make people stop even just for a minute and pay attention to us and to our message. We also chose Van Gogh Sunflowers in particular because when we were in the gallery for the action, we both noticed that there was a small description on the wall next to a painting. And they talked in this description, it talks about how Van Gogh used yellows and oranges to symbolize hope and a belief in sort of a better future. And, you know, what is more fitting for an environmental movement than something that so clearly depicts hope? And we needed to symbolize to people and inform people that this hope that we have is being put under threat every single day that this government chooses to push forward new fossil fuel licenses. The final thing that went into our decision to target Van Gogh is because our action symbolized the link between the climate crisis and the cost of living crisis. And Vincent van Gogh was a poor, mentally ill artist who lived and died in debt. If anyone was going to suffer under this Tory government, it would have been Van Gogh. So he definitely, if he is a victim of anyone, it would have been of the Tory government.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. So we have another question from our East Bergerholt High School student here, and this one is for Graham. As someone who was working for Shell, was there a particular light bulb moment as a reason for perhaps changing teams perhaps, or that sort of moment where you realized that becoming part of a different cause perhaps was the answer?
I mean, that's a very good question. I originally joined Shell a long time ago because I wanted to work in an industry which it had bought into, which was solar panels. They also spent money on wind power as well. And eventually I got into that part of the business. About half my career in Shell was spent looking at renewable options to replace oil. But over the whole of that period, when I joined, Shell was an oil company. And when I left, it was a bigger oil company. Almost none of the work that got done, I was in research for the whole of that period, none of it was ever implemented. And that's because it's an oil and gas company and the work was, I mean, I feel really distressed by this because I thought I was doing something useful and I was not. I was part of a greenwash machine for the company. You look at the amount of money it spent on research and in these areas, and the amount of money it spent on renewable technologies. And then you look at how much money they spent just advertising what with those activities. Vastly more money gets spent on advertising small renewable initiatives than actually implementing them. And I think that's kind of slowly dawned on me over time. And eventually I just couldn't take it anymore.
Absolutely. So we have a question in here from Dorothy, and that is, what makes you want to become an activist? What do you feel or think when the environmental crisis is not treated like the priority in the collective decision making? So would Phoebe perhaps like to answer that one?
First thing I would say is I don't think there's anything that makes you an activist. We're all ordinary people, but we're people who are aware of how serious this situation is. As a young person, if you're not scared, you're not paying attention, because the only future I see for myself is one of mass famine, constant floods, wildfires, droughts, and societal collapse. Sorry, somebody else wanted to answer. Can I pass on? Can I pass on to Oliver?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh, your shoes to fill. Yeah, on like why it is that that I've felt like becoming an activist, then I suppose so much for me, and this was already like touched on by Phoebe in her introduction, was the like we are standing on the shoulders of the activists that came before us. Like we would not have the rights that we did without it. So there were people who had to fight for, you know, the weekend, for women to have the right to vote, for civil rights. There were people who came out as gay at a time when that was destroying their careers, destroying their families, destroying their futures, and landing those people in jail. But they did that so that we could have those rights now. And it would just be kind of, well, I don't want to be like hyperbolic, but it kind of feels like spitting in their face to just enjoy all of the kind of rights that they sacrificed so we could have, and then not do anything for the people that are suffering now. They fought so that we could have rights. Now it's time for us to pass on the baton.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Oliver. So we have time for just a few more questions. So if you have any that you want to get in, please get them in now. And yeah, a few more, and then we're going to have to wrap up. So we have a question here. My impression is that a lot of people get the idea that Just Stop Oil want to stop the use of all oil and gas, petrol, diesel, etc. Right this second. If that's right, might want to help get the messaging that JSO is about stopping new oil. This is, of course, a very common misconception that JSO gets. We get it all the time. And for that one, shall I pass to Louise? Would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, that is a common misconception. Yeah, Just Stop Oil are demanding an immediate halt to future licensing and consents for new fossil fuel projects in the UK. So we're not saying turn off the petrol tap overnight. We understand that would not work, but we also understand there's about 7 to 8 years of current reserves of fossil fuels in the UK still. So we don't need to keep drilling for new oil, for new gas, even for new coal. We have enough fossil fuel reserves in order to transition immediately to renewable energy. So we need to start that transition. We need to stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, £200 million a week. We need to put that into renewable energies. You know, solar farms take weeks, onshore wind takes months, offshore wind takes up around 6 years to actually come online and available to use. These things could help us in the cost of living crisis now, the energy crisis now. New fossil fuel projects, they can take decades, they can take 20, 30 years to actually become available to use. So we're not saying overnight, stop it all now. We're not saying stop driving your car, etc. We're saying we need system change. We need governments to stop subsidizing, stop investing in new oil and gas and coal. And we need a just transition, which is paid for by world leaders and by the rich. Actually tax these fossil fuel companies a sufficient windfall tax, and support the workers in those communities, in those industries, to transfer to renewable energies. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. We have time for just 2 more questions. So starting with, and this one is for Chloe. In attacking artworks, do you aim to raise awareness on arts institutions as institutions' ties to oil business, apart from just getting attention for the climate crisis in a more general sense? And if so, do you aim to have a conversation with such art institutions?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. Thank you so much for asking that. So as well as being involved with Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, I'm also involved with Culture Declares Emergency. And that is the arts industries, the culture industries' response to the crisis. And that's about creating a conversation within our industries about where our funding comes from and the stories that we tell, and supporting artists to be able to communicate about the climate crisis. So that, I think, is of absolute crucial importance. There are lots of organisations like Culture Unstained who are particularly focused on calling out the fossil fuel funding of our cultural institutions, which is essentially greenwash. That's buying themselves social licence through using trusted, morally solid brands like the British Museum or the National Gallery or the Tate or National Theatre. So calling out the fossil fuel funding that is propping up those institutions is really, really important, because that is essentially continuing their social licence to carry on operating. And for me personally, I've spent a lot of time asking myself whether I can still justify doing my job within the theatre industry specifically, because it feels like there are so many more important things I should be doing right now in respect of the climate crisis. And I have continued to justify it to myself, because I feel that art and culture and entertainment is one of the most important tools that we've got to support the work that direct action is doing by taking these stories into, I mean, what happens with art is it can directly affect your heart. So you can hear a whole lot of information and it can make academic, intellectual sense to you. But actually, in order to create the shift that we need in our culture, in our society, in people as individuals, we need to change the way that they feel inside themselves and in their heart. And that's why I feel like there's an awful lot of work I can still do within the industry as partly supporting artists to continue to tell those important stories, and partly also supporting the initiatives that are happening within the theatre industry in particular to work out how we make our industry more sustainable. So yeah, I think our cultural world is incredibly important as a part of the puzzle of how we solve this problem.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chloe. So we have a burning question from Charlie. Put simply, do you think there's any way to bring people together to tackle the climate crisis that doesn't involve the polarizing effects of disruptive intervention tactics, but I fear prevent us talking about the climate science? So would Graham, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, thanks. Very good question. I think one of the things that you need to do is you, as aspiring journalists or active journalists now, you need to talk about it more. It's up to you as well as it's up to us. We use inconveniencing the public and disruption in part because it's how we get into the media to tell our story, to tell the truth about the climate crisis. But you can do it too. So I would say that would be my answer. Talk about it. You talk about it.
Thank you very much. Shall I just quickly pass to James? Would you like to add anything real quick to that?
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because it's such a big issue. And we do need to make change really quickly. And historically, the only way we've seen that is possible is through direct action. But yeah, I'd agree with Graham about, please, look, media, you've got such a big opportunity as journalists to tell the truth, to call out our criminal government about what they're doing, to call out these corporations making obscene profits at a time when we've got a cost of living crisis, you know. So yeah, please continue to report on stuff, get it in the news every day. And unfortunately, there are always going to be naysayers. There are always going to be people that don't take it seriously. But if you can tell the truth, if you can educate and inform people as journalists, I think that's a massive responsibility you've got. Then we'll be setting ourselves on the right course, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Louise, would you like to add anything to this one?
I just wanted to add, like you say, where is it, the kind of like alienating kind of effect of disruptive action, or something like that, polarizing effects of disruptive action. But I think it's also, it really matters how you report on our disruption. You know, some of these tabloids, you know, hysterical eco-zealot, you know, they're out of their minds. That is so damaging because it looks like we're just crazy people, you know, screaming about the end of the world, as if it's not actually happening. So the way that you actually report on us, the way in which you report on any climate disasters, you know, you need to link that to who's responsible for that. It's fossil fuels, it's the fossil fuel industry, it's world leaders who are literally driving us faster towards human extinction. We are not the enemy here. So it's kind of like what Rachel said before, you have a huge role in this, but also how you report on our actions. And yeah, the fact that we have to cause disruption to be even mentioned by you, again, you have a lot of responsibility in terms of that.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. So we do have time for just another quick extra question here. And it's another question from the East Bergerholt High School student who has asked, if the government continues not to listen or to act, will your approach change, or is the public awareness that has been raised simply enough? Louise, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we have seen that public awareness does have a really positive effect. For example, the M25 actions in November alone, the increased public awareness of Just Stop Oil from those actions alone led to the equivalent of 1.75 million more people supporting Friends of the Earth, a more moderate climate group. So that increasing the awareness is definitely really important and effective, but absolutely, so far it's not enough alone, because legislative change hasn't happened. That's our demand. We want the government to immediately halt all new fossil fuel projects. They haven't done that, and the longer they go on with this death project, the more and more we're going to have to fight against it and non-violently resist it. So we'll be left with no choice but to escalate. But the more and more people that we can get on board, you can get on board, then the faster we will save humanity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Rachel, would you like to add anything to that one?
Yeah, just very quickly. Sometimes we get asked types of questions like this, as if the government haven't responded in 10 months, so maybe we should do something else. But social change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And all of these groups throughout history didn't give up because they were met with resistance. They were met with slurs. They were met with complete violence in the media, violence on the ground. It took years for ACT UP activists in New York to get the government to listen and to really invest in life-saving medicine. And they could not give up because their lives were at stake. They knew if the government did not listen, they were going to die. And we are in the exact same situation. If the government don't listen, we are all going to die. People are already dying. So we have absolutely no choice but to escalate, to try new tactics, to try new things, just as historical groups have done throughout history.
Absolutely. Oliver, anything to add to that one?
Yeah, well, lots of it's been said already. But I was just going to throw out there that often it's treated as though what we're trying to do is just to raise awareness, and we're really not. We are here about legislative change. And I'm sure lots of you will have been told, about the climate crisis for years. And obviously, it was known about by fossil fuel scientists since the 70s and covered up. But I mean, on top of that, I was told about the rainforest being lost on the back of cereal boxes. They were saying about how we're having deforestation on Blue Peter. We need to sort the climate crisis, and none of it did anything. No, all of these campaigns, all of this kind of massive raising of awareness, that didn't lead to the government stopping and saying, actually, we're going to start taking this seriously now. What it needed to actually push them to take action is that civil resistance. They need to know that if they don't kind of step away from the fossil fuel lobbyists and start listening to their actual constituents, they need to know that if they don't do that, then they'll face civil resistance. That's what's going to make them change.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Oliver. And that is all the questions that we have time for today. So thank you very much to everyone who sent in questions. Those were some really, really interesting questions. My apologies if your question did not get answered. Sadly, due to limited time, we were not able to get around anyone. So apologies for that. So for a final sort of statement from our panel today, I'm going to pass over to Anna. You may have heard a lot of statements in social media saying the words, "We won't quit." So to explain that further, over to Anna.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you everyone so much for coming. I just want to end this conference on just something of an explanation as to why we won't quit, and also a call to action to every single one of you, not just as journalists, but as people with power. So since 2019, I've dedicated so much of my time and energy to organising marches, signing petitions, and writing more letters to my MP than I can count. What Just Stop Oil has shown us, however, is that there is a way to make a change, and it isn't through marches, petitions, or letters. It is through ordinary people taking that crucial step into non-violent direct action. Ordinary people refusing to be ignored and revoking their consent to be governed by the group of criminals who are currently sitting in Parliament. I was just one of hundreds who were inspired into action last year, and this year we need thousands. We will not survive another 2 years under a Tory government that chooses to fund fossil fuels over families. We are barely surviving now. People in the global south are not surviving. And as these past years have proven, no one will fight for us, so we have to fight for ourselves. With this in mind, and after the successes of Just Stop Oil last year, why on earth would we quit in 2023? No, now is the time to turn all of the conversation we generated last year into action. After October, we had secured the attention of the world. What are we going to do with that attention? We're going to bring an end to the fossil fuel industry. It is not an option to sit back and do nothing. At this time in history, complacency will kill us just as quickly as Sunak's addiction to fossil fuels will. We are going to be holding talks and trainings across the country. So it's anyone who is sick and tired of this government selling their futures to the highest bidder can come along and find out exactly what they can do about it. If you did nothing in 2022, now is your chance to make up for that and do something in 2023. Whether it's throwing soup at art, occupying oil terminals, or reporting on the climate crisis with the true sense of urgency that humanity deserves, we need you to join us in showing the government that they can't neglect us anymore. I am so scared that my future has been sold to Shell, and so furious that this government that I did not vote for had the power to line their pockets with money taken straight from starving, freezing families. I will not let them represent me and my views. In 2023, I and all of us in Just Stop Oil are removing our names from this life-threatening agreement that was signed on our behalf behind the closed doors of 10 Downing Street. Not in my name are they going to force another family to choose between heating their homes and feeding their children. We won't allow fossil fuels to rule our lives. Direct action is the only morally reasonable response to this crisis. So direct action is what we're going to take until the government agrees to no new oil and gas, and now stupidly coal exploration. And we are not going to stop a second sooner. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Anna. Just to wrap up for today, you'll have seen that a message has been posted in the chat detailing the talks that we put on all over the country called Our Responsibilities at This Time. If you'd like to learn more about Just Stop Oil, I highly recommend that you come along to one of those. It's a chance to meet some of us in person in your local area. And yeah, it's a brilliant talk to go along to. We also have to mention April 21st, which is going to be the time when thousands will take to the street to demand change, not just Stop Oil, not just Extinction Rebellion, but all kinds of groups who are uniting under this demand to stop new oil and gas. If you would like pictures or videos or any kind of media content that has been taken and actions, these will be sent around after this call today to our public Google Drive. So please do help yourself to any media content that you would like from there. And that is everything. So thank you very much for coming today and enjoy the rest of your day.